His name was David Kowalski, retired electrician, Cleveland, Ohio, 41 years of honest work. He did everything right. He showed up, he paid his taxes, he put a little into his 401k every month. Not as much as he should have, but something. He owned a modest home in a neighborhood he'd lived in for 30 years. And in the spring of 2023, at 67 years old, David Kowalski sat down at his kitchen table and did the math for the first time. Really did the math. His Social Security check? $1,740 a month. His 401k balance, after the 2022 market correction, $94,000. His monthly expenses? Mortgage, utilities, insurance, medication, $2,600. The gap wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a crisis you could point to on a news broadcast. It was quiet, slow, the financial equivalent a leak in the roof that you keep meaning to fix. David called his daughter that night. He didn't ask for money. He just said, "I think I made some mistakes." He hadn't. Not really. David made the same decisions millions of Americans made, guided by the same conventional wisdom, the same advice, the same system that was designed for an economy that no longer exists. And what's happening to David right now, quietly in kitchens and around dining room tables from Scranton to Sacramento, is about to collide with the single largest wealth event in American history. Today, I want to show you both sides of that collision, the threat most people aren't taking seriously enough, and the opportunity that the same people are completely missing. Because what's coming over the next 20 years isn't just a crisis. For the people who understand it, it's a transformation. Let's start with the honest picture. The Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances found that the median retirement savings for Americans between the ages of 55 and 64, the people closest to retirement, is approximately $134,000. Let that sit for a moment. $134,000 sounds like a lot of money until you do the math. Financial planners use something called the 4% rule, the idea that you can safely withdraw 4% of your retirement savings per year without running out of money over a 30-year retirement. 4% of $134,000 is $5,360 per year. That's $446 a month. Add the average Social Security benefit of roughly $1,907 per month as of 2025, and the median American approaching retirement is looking at total income of approximately $2,353 per month. The federal poverty guideline for a single person in 2025 is $1,255 per month. So most Americans won't technically be in poverty. They'll be somewhere in that gray, exhausting space between poverty and comfort. The space where you stop going to the dentist, where you skip the heating bill in October because November might be worse, where every car repair is a crisis. Vanguard's annual How America Saves report found that nearly 45% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved for retirement. Not $10,000 less than they need. $10,000 total. And the generation carrying the heaviest burden? Generation X. The 65 million Americans born between 1965 and 1980 who were too young to benefit fully from the pension era and too old to have grown up with financial literacy as a cultural norm. They entered the workforce just as companies began replacing guaranteed pensions with 401k plans, a shift that transferred all the investment risk from corporations onto individual workers who had received exactly zero training in how to manage it. Fidelity's research from 2024 found that the average Gen X worker has saved approximately $182,000 for retirement, against a recommended target, depending on income, of $1 million to $1.5 million. That's a gap that simple math cannot close in the time remaining. This isn't a story about laziness or irresponsibility. It's a story about a system that changed the rules without changing the education. And it's about to intersect with something that has the potential to rewrite the outcome for millions of people if they understand what's coming. Here's what most Americans aren't paying attention to. Right now, as we're having this conversation, the largest transfer of wealth in recorded human history is underway. Cerulli Associates, one of the most respected financial research firms in the country, released data in 2025 projecting that approximately $124 trillion in assets will change hands in the United States between now and 2048. $124 trillion. To put that in perspective, the entire annual economic output of every country on Earth, the United States, China, Europe, Japan, all of it combined, is approximately $105 trillion. The wealth being transferred between American families over the next 23 years exceeds the total annual production of the entire planet. Where is this money coming from? Baby boomers. The 73 million Americans born between 1946 and 1964 currently control approximately 52% of all wealth in the United States. That's roughly $78 trillion concentrated in a single generation. As they age, the youngest boomers turn 62 this year, the oldest are approaching 80, that wealth will move. To spouses, to children, to grandchildren, to charities. Cerulli estimates that Generation X will receive approximately $39 trillion over the next 25 years. Millennials will receive approximately $46 trillion. Even Gen Z will begin seeing significant inheritances as the transfer accelerates through the 2030s. Now here's the critical distinction, and this is where most coverage of this topic goes wrong. Most people hear $124 trillion wealth transfer and think inheritance. They think someone's going to write them a check. Some will, but Cerulli's own data shows that approximately 62% of the wealth being transferred will come from high net worth and ultra high net worth households. These represent roughly 2% of all households in America. The wealth transfer is deeply concentrated. A small number of families will inherit staggering amounts. Most families will inherit more modest sums, or nothing at all. So why does this matter to the 98%? Because $124 trillion in motion doesn't sit still. When trillions transfer into the hands of a new generation, it gets spent, it gets invested, it gets deployed into businesses, real estate, and markets. It creates ripple effects that touch every corner of the economy, including the corners where ordinary people live and work. And the people who understand where those ripples are going to land can position themselves to benefit, even if they never receive a single dollar of inheritance. Let me walk you through 4 specific areas where the wealth transfer will create opportunity for everyday Americans. Ripple 1. The real estate reshuffling. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough. Over the next 15 years, roughly 23 million boomer-owned homes will enter the market. Not all at once, gradually, as owners downsize, move to care facilities, or pass away. This is going to create unusual dynamics. In markets where boomers concentrated, suburban areas built in the 1970s and 80s, traditional retirement destinations like parts of Florida and Arizona, supply is going to increase significantly. Home prices in these areas may moderate, or in some cases fall, as inventory builds faster than demand absorbs it. But in markets where younger generations want to live, mid-sized cities with technology employers, affordable metros with strong job growth, demand is going to intensify as newly wealthy millennials and Gen Xers pursue home ownership. The National Association of Realtors has already documented this divergence. Markets like Austin, Raleigh, Nashville, Columbus, and Indianapolis have dramatically outperformed, while legacy suburban markets have stagnated. If you have any flexibility about where you live, understanding this geography translates directly into wealth accumulation. The same $400,000 home purchase in the right market versus the wrong market could mean a $200,000 difference in equity over 15 years. And if you already own in a high-demand market, the wealth transfer is likely to be your silent ally. Ripple 2. the career opportunity nobody's talking about. When $124 trillion changes hands, entire industries grow to manage the process. Estate attorneys, financial planners, tax advisors, trust administrators, wealth managers, real estate agents specializing in estate sales, and senior care placement advisors. These aren't just jobs, they're businesses, and the demand curve is steep and predictable. The number of Americans over 65 will increase from approximately 57 million today to nearly 82 million by 2050. Every single one of those people or their families will need help navigating what happens to their assets. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that employment in financial advising will grow 17% through 2032, nearly 3 times faster than the average occupation. The people who develop skills in estate planning, elder law, wealth management, or senior financial services right now are positioning themselves at the base of a very long escalator. This isn't a pivot that requires starting over. For a paralegal, it means developing elder law expertise. For a real estate agent, it means specializing in estate sales and senior transitions. For an accountant, it means building estate and trust competency. The credential investment is real, but modest. The return over a 20-year career could be extraordinary. Ripple 3. The stock market tailwind. When trillions of dollars transfer into the hands of younger investors, it gets invested differently than baby boomers invested it. Bank of America research shows that 72% of investors between ages 21 and 43 believe traditional stocks and bonds alone can no longer produce above-average returns. Younger investors show stronger preferences for technology exposure, clean energy, healthcare innovation, and alternative investments. This generational shift in capital preferences will create sustained demand for specific sectors of the market over the coming decades. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not recommending you try to pick winners. The research on individual stock selection is humbling. The vast majority of professional fund managers fail to beat a simple index fund over a 10-year period. What I am saying is this. Broad market exposure through low-cost index funds captures all of these tailwinds automatically. When $1 trillion flows into technology companies, the S&P 500 goes up. When $1 trillion flows into healthcare, the S&P 500 goes up. You don't need to predict the specific destination, you just need to be in the water when the tide rises. The historical case for this is not subtle. From 2009 through early 2026, the S&P 500 rose over 900%. $100 invested at the 2009 bottom became approximately $1,000. Not through genius, not through timing, through presence. The great wealth transfer adds a new and significant tailwind to an already proven strategy. Ripple 4. The spousal transfer dynamic. This is the ripple that almost nobody covers, and it may be the most significant for financial services professionals. Cerulli estimates that approximately $54 trillion will first transfer to surviving spouses before eventually passing to the next generation. And of those spousal transfers, nearly $40 trillion will go to widowed women. Women, statistically, outlive men by an average of 5 to 6 years, and in many households, particularly among older generations where traditional gender roles shaped financial management, women were less involved in investment decisions during their marriage. This creates an enormous and underserved market. Tens of millions of women will find themselves controlling unprecedented wealth, often with limited experience managing it, during one of the most vulnerable periods of their lives. Financial advisors, planners, and counselors who develop genuine expertise serving this demographic, not generic expertise, but deep empathy and specialized knowledge, will capture business that compounds for decades. This isn't a cynical observation, it's a call to serve a real and significant need. Remember David Kowalski, the retired electrician from Cleveland? His story doesn't end at that kitchen table in 2023. After that phone call with his daughter, David did something that seemed small but turned out to be significant. He made an appointment with a fee-only financial advisor, not someone who earns commissions on products they sell, but someone who charges a flat fee for honest advice. The advisor didn't perform miracles. She didn't find hidden money or pitch him a get-rich scheme. What she did was help David see three things clearly. First, his house. A modest home he'd owned for 30 years in a Cleveland neighborhood had appreciated, not dramatically, but steadily, to approximately $210,000. He hadn't thought of it as an asset, he thought of it as home. She helped him see it as both. Second, his Social Security timing. David had filed for Social Security at 63 because he'd read somewhere that you should take it as soon as you can. What he hadn't understood was that each year he delayed between 62 and 70, his benefit would have grown by approximately 8%. Filing at 63 instead of 67 had permanently reduced his monthly benefit by roughly $580. That mistake, a single decision made without full information, would cost him approximately $125,000 over a 20-year retirement. Third, his 401k. It was sitting entirely in a money market account. His employer's plan had automatically moved it there when he retired for safety. It had earned approximately 2% annually while inflation ran at 4%. His $94,000 was effectively shrinking in real terms every year. None of these were catastrophic errors. Each one was fixable, or at least manageable with the right information. David isn't going to become a millionaire. That ship has some challenging headwinds. But he reorganized his financial life in ways that the advisor estimated would extend his financial runway by 11 years. 11 years of not having to ask his daughter for help. David's story is important not because it's dramatic, but because it's typical. David Kowalski still lives in Cleveland. His financial situation isn't perfect. Retirement at 67 with $94,000 saved doesn't offer a lot of margin. But he sold his house in 2024 during a period of strong local demand, moved into a smaller rental, and deployed the equity into a diversified index portfolio. He delayed his Medicare supplemental decisions until he had better information. He started volunteering as a financial literacy mentor at his local library and discovered, in the process, that financial advisors with elder care specialties in his area were in such demand that several firms had offered to bring him on as a part-time client liaison. He's not rich, but he's not out of runway either. What David figured out, slowly, imperfectly, later than he wished, is that the rules aren't as fixed as they seem, that information changes outcomes, that the transfer of $124 trillion creates not just risk for the unprepared, but genuine, documented, accessible opportunity for people willing to understand it. You now have that understanding. The question, the only question that remains, is what you do with it.